made it. It's Friday. It's happy hour. What more could you possibly want in life? Thanks so much for being here. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me, of course, on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can find the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. It is not a slow time of year with free agency coming up. The rumor mill is rumor milling, and we've got DK Metcalf stuff going on. Whether you want to believe how real it is or not, I have no idea. We've got different reports in regards to that, but it is a fun time of year to discuss all the things that could happen with the Green Bay Packers. Of course, the combine going on as well. We'll talk about all of it, I'm sure, throughout the course of the chat today. I've got about 45 minutes, so just as a heads up on that, Super Chats will always go to the top of the list. I do have it set for subscribers only, so make sure that if you are not a subscriber, that you do so that you can get your questions in as well. And of course, we will prioritize member chats towards the end as well. So we'll get into it right away, though. Zachary starts off by asking, I would love a trade for DK. Just don't let the receiver leaving be Dobbs or Reed. Also, did you see any combine yet? Shamar Stewart is such a freak athlete. Unfortunately, he's up on other boards too. Yeah, Stewart tore it up. Really, really fun for him. Obviously, you have the question of super freak athlete, all the intangible stuff, the traits just off the charts, and then the production was a lot lower. So I'm excited to dive into his tape, although I do think that you're right. I think 23 is probably a pipe dream. Plus 23 is going to be gone for a trade anyway. I say that in jest. I don't think they're trading away 23 for DK Metcalf, but we will see. But yeah, Shamar Stewart tore it up. As far as your DK comment, Jaden Reed for sure. Romeo Dobbs, I would have no problem trading whatsoever. And I think the big thing that you have to be aware of is he's got 1 year left on his deal. And there's no guarantee that they re-sign him back this next offseason in 2026. So if you think he's a 1 year player on your team and you're not going to give him some big contract, well, then at that point in time, you're probably better off going in another, or just getting something in return for him, right? At minimum, I would not let that be a deal breaker. And that's not anything against Romeo. I like Romeo, but he did have the suspension this past year. He's got the double concussion from this past year. Like I would definitely not let that be the deal breaker. Like if Seattle was like, listen, we'll do this deal, second round pick plus Romeo Dobbs, I wouldn't let Romeo Dobbs get in the way of that. If I wanted DK that much, that's not a deal breaker for me. Jaden Reed would be a difference for sure. I think Jaden Reed's still going to be a really, really good football player. I think he already is. Just has to hold on to the ball, have a little bit more confidence. He'll bounce back in year 3. Not super concerned about that. But for me, Romeo would not be a deal breaker. Jaden Reed would. And I'm in on a DK trade if you can make something that works for both sides. I would not go first round pick plus stuff for DK. That's a little bit too aggressive. I think second and a receiver, something like that seems like it would make sense for both sides. But we'll have to see if there's any smoke or any fire to this smoke, I should say. And then, where this ends up if it in fact somehow does get done. Chicken, hi, Andy. I'll let other people talk about DK. Should LaFleur consider letting some of his responsibilities as head coach go to someone else, like fourth downs and challenges, kind of what the Bills did, hiring a former ref so he can focus on calling plays with a clear head? We saw what happens in the first Vikings game when he's too emotional and not focused. I think this is much ado about nothing. And I know that, people may disagree on this. Number one, let me start by saying this. I absolutely love the passion that Matt LaFleur coaches with. I don't think he's too emotional. I don't think it's ever really clouded him. Now, again, maybe a challenge flag here or there. Sure, maybe. But I don't think his being emotional and his being fired up has ever really cost Green Bay to any great degree. In fact, what I see is a head coach who cares, who wants to win, who cares about his guys, who is motivated to do everything in his power to get a W at the end of the day. I love that passion. I love that intensity. I've coached stuff in the past. I have that same level of intensity. Like I want to win and I want to see that out of my head coach. No questions about it. So I don't hate that at all. In fact, I think that's more of a desirable trait to me than anything else. Now, if it, again, gets out of control, I've never seen it reach that point. And again, maybe a couple challenge flags here or there that, the moment got the best of them or whatever. Again, in the entire history of Matt LaFleur coaching for this team so far, if that's what we're going to talk about, to me, his passion for this team, his passion for winning fuels him to that level. And that is far more of a positive than a couple, maybe boneheaded decisions in the scheme of a game. So I don't have a major issue with that. The second thing is he does delegate a lot of this stuff. So he does have certain things that he delegates. He listens to the analytics guys from upstairs. He has people upstairs telling him if he should challenge a play or not. Now, sometimes he may go rogue on some of that stuff, but he does have a lot of that stuff delegated out. And I certainly don't want to see him give up play calling or play design or anything like that. I don't think there's too much on his plate. I think he can absolutely handle what he is supposed to do on a game in and game out and day-to-day basis. if things change, if things get worse, if all of a sudden there's a huge down swing in what Green Bay is doing from a productivity standpoint or just a winning standpoint, then let's have that conversation. This is a coach who has won a ton of games in the NFL, is one of the all-time leaders in NFL wins in the regular season or win percentage, and is, in my opinion, still doing a fantastic job. I think we're jumping a little bit, to conclusions to say that we need to change a bunch of stuff up with Matt. I think he's doing a great job of leading this team. It needs to get a little bit better if Green Bay wants to be better. But I think if all of a sudden players go out and execute at the level they're capable of executing that, I think that probably changes some of that stuff anyway. But I've not like super concerned with Matt and where he's at as a head coach or a play caller or anything like that. A couple things that he can clean up. I'm sure he will this offseason. And if he doesn't, if it gets worse, then let's talk about it. But for now, his level of success, I think, speaks for itself. And now he in this organization, and as Brian Gutekunst has said, it's time to have a level of urgency of going out and winning championships. So let's see what this season brings. But for now, I have no concern with it whatsoever. We're saying for weeks that Shamar Stewart was our most likely first-round pick, but now I highly doubt he gets to us. Perfect 10. Raz is crazy. Goody is drooling right now. I bet he's a trade-up candidate for us. Maybe let me just add to this perfect 10 Raz score, though, because we need to figure out something of how we label this, because he's not a perfect 10 Raz score. Now, he is, but he's not. And what I mean by that is he didn't do the agility testing. And had he done the agility testing, he, in all likelihood, would not have been a perfect 10 relative athletic score guy. So we have to label this a bit different. If you want like the perfect 10, if you want to be considered like the, ultimate player at your position from a testing standpoint, and I know Raz is just an offshoot thing. It's not anything like the NFL recognizes or anything like that, but you have to do all the testing. He did not do the agility testing. If he did, we are not talking about him as a 10 RAS guy. So to me, it should at least have an asterisk next to it. But your point stands. He's a freak athlete. He's somebody that I think Green Bay would have a ton of interest in. And to your point, I think he will probably not be there at 23 because of a lot of what he did this weekend. And really, that don't count it twice, right? That athleticism was already on the tape. You knew he was going to test through the roof, and he did that. So he just kind of backed it up. But we'll see. Again, I don't think he's there at 23, but crazier things have happened in the NFL draft, and we'll just have to kind of take it as it comes and see who's there when they pick at 23. But he would definitely be somebody I think Green Bay would have a lot of interest in. Happy DB and tight end combine Friday. You are such a sports guy, Andy. It's infectious. I have a non-football question for you. I know this all started as a labor of love. Did you ever imagine it growing into what you have worked so hard to build? Is your family involved to any extent, or do your kids show any interest in possibly carrying the Pack-A-Day torch one day? Those are all great questions. When I first started this, there was no inkling of this being a full-time job. Actually, so a year and a half ago, I made the transition to going full-time and doing this, as my main job and everything like that. About 6 months before that, I had been talking about it and looking at it. And I thought, for the first time, around 6 months before I did it, for the first time I was talking about maybe in like 3-4 years, I could maybe do something with it full time. And then right before I did it, again, probably actually about 2 years ago, exactly. It was probably 2 years ago exactly at this time in 2023. It was tax time. And I was just kind of putting everything together and looking at the numbers and looking how things were trending. And I was like, holy bleep. Like, I think I can do this. Like, I think if things continue to trend the way that they are, I actually think now is kind of like the ultimate time, the best time to actually to make this switch. And man, I dotted every I and crossed every T. Yeah, I talked to Tom Grossi because he made that switch from, his job into doing it full time. I talked to him and he was gracious enough to give me a bunch of advice. I talked to a bunch of people, talked to a lot of accounting people, talked to a lot of financial people. Man, I did everything. And let me just say this too. I would have needed to be like 3,000% sure. Even if I was 100% sure, I wouldn't have even been close to what I would have needed to have been to kind of leave my full-time job, because I love my full-time job. It was an unbelievable full-time job. So I had to be very crystal clear. And like I said, even 6 months before I made the transition, it was not something that I had thought was possible. And then the more I looked at it, the more I thought it was. And it has been just a dream come true. A lot of work, a crap ton of work. But like I said, a dream come true. I'm happy I did it, but no, I did not see it as something that was going to build into that for really a long period of time. And in fact, probably like almost like 2 years before, when like somebody would ask me the question, and I know people have quoted me on this in the past too, I said, like, I think I'm closer to the opposite end of it, of like maybe just scaling back and making it more of a hobby than, making it the full-time gig. And just thankfully it pivoted the other way and went in this full-time direction. So very blessed, and thank you all for that. The opportunity to talk Packers 365 is, like I said, a dream come true. And that's all in great part due to all of you and your support. As far as my family, I mean, I think the biggest thing is that, all right. Demovsky just tweeted a breaking news and I wasn't sure what it was, but it's just that the Packers raised ticket prices again, of course. So yeah, there you go. But of course there's sacrifices from a family standpoint, right? Like there's certain times on Sundays in season, like I'm just not available all day Sunday during the season, right? Obviously like draft weekends and things like that. There are certain things that I'm not able to be around for, and especially when, the kids were younger and things like that. There's a lot of sacrifice there, but they are awesome with it. They've all been unbelievably supportive. It's all worked out amazingly. And as far as either of the boys, Elijah or Xavier, taking it on, Xavier will have the personality and the charisma far more even than I do for it. That will not be a problem. He enjoys the Packers, enjoys football, but I don't know that it's yet to that level. But I wasn't at that level when I was close to actually, I don't know. I was pretty geeking out around age 11 already, but we'll see. That part of it would develop. And when when he's been asked about it, he hasn't really seemed super interested, but again, he's 11. Elijah will be the one, he's into everything, all the stats, into all the different teams and who's winning and things like that, likes watching a little bit more. So he could easily be that. But again, he's 7 years old. So we've got a ways to go, but maybe, hopefully someday, but certainly not going to force anything on them. That is to say the least. But great question. I appreciate that, Dan. Happy Friday, Andy. Was Stafford getting his money by showing the Rams he was worth it? Aaron may not need to move from his home and continuing to enjoy his great lifestyle of New York City. Go Pack, go. It's possible. It is very possible. He could ultimately end up in New York still, going from the Jets to the Giants. Man, I guess if you're the Giants, you could pick up Aaron and then, draft a quarterback early and let Aaron be sort of the bridge quarterback. I guess. I don't know. To me, it doesn't make a ton of sense for the Giants. Just bring in the other Jets quarterback, bring in Tyrod Taylor. I think he's already a Giant, so that probably doesn't work. But, just bring in a little bit more of a stopgap guy and go in that direction rather than, Aaron Rodgers. But listen, I think if you're the Giants and Rodgers comes to you, which apparently and reportedly he did do, I think that changes the connotation a little bit. If I'm the Giants and I don't have a great quarterback option and I'm Brian Daboll and that front office and they're completely on the hot seat and I can draft a quarterback early, like a Cam Ward, and then also, try to win now with Aaron Rodgers and with Malik Neighbors and things like that, I guess I can somewhat understand the vision. Probably not what I would do, but if my job was on the line and the opportunity is start a rookie quarterback or go with Drew Lock or Tyrod Taylor or something like that, yeah, I'll probably take my chances with Aaron Rodgers and Malik Neighbors and maybe Devontae Adams and that, sort of crew. But it's interesting nonetheless. But it would work out great, obviously, from Aaron if he could just move from one locker room to the other and stay exactly where he is right now. All right, let's see here. Tom Brady also 0-2 this offseason, failing to land Ben Johnson and now Stafford. That makes me smile. I love that for you, Mike. I like that, Dan. All right, perfect. Happy Friday, Andy. Wondering if the force with which Love throws the ball, especially in short and medium distance passes, may be contributing factor to how many drops. Nah, I don't see it that way. I think Jordan can put good touch on the ball. He will, rip a ball when need be, but I will guarantee you this. I will guarantee you Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, all those guys will tell you that they should be coming up with the ball when it's thrown to them. That's not an excuse. And listen, go back and watch Brett Favre, right? He would rifle those balls, even if it was 15, 20 yards away, 10 yards away. Those things were on a line. Rodgers certainly had times where he did that as well. The pace of the ball should not play a factor. Receivers got to come up with it. Now, again, if you're throwing to Emmanuel Wilson or something, and he's coming over the middle, yeah, you probably want to have a little bit more of I need to put some touch on this, but no, Jordan's throwing a good ball. When the accurate ones that are being dropped, and the receivers need to do a better job of coming up with that. Nicholas, wouldn't you rather keep Jaire than take a chance of him going to Detroit or Minnesota? That's not. Thanks for the super chat first, Nicholas. You shouldn't ever look at it that way, in my opinion. You have to do, first of all, what's best for your franchise. Take care of yourself first. If I'm a GM of the Packers, My job is to build a Super Bowl team in Green Bay. Okay. Period. End of story. If I've built a Super Bowl team, whatever any other team does, whether it's in the division, outside of the division, I got to get all through that through the course of the season anyway. I got to get through the division in season. I've got to get through the playoffs. I've got to get through the Super Bowl. At the end of the day, if you're a Super Bowl team, you're a Super Bowl team. If you're a Super Bowl contender, you have the roster. I am focused on me. I'm focused on what I can do to make sure that I have the best Packers team possible to go out and win a Super Bowl. And whatever happens after that, if it means that, Jaire ends up in Minnesota or Detroit, it means that that Jaire is ending up in Minnesota or Detroit. We'll have another challenge along the way that's hopefully going to sharpen us on our way to the Super Bowl. But I can't GM afraid of I really want to release Jaire Alexander because I don't think he's worth the money. And I want to be able to use that money elsewhere and maybe get something in return, or even if you release him, right, just getting the salary cap in space in return. But you know what? Minnesota or Detroit could sign him. So I'm just going to hold on to him instead. It's just the wrong sort of mindset to have. You have to attack it so that you're building your best team. And on top of that, the gambit that you're playing here, the reason, unless there's some off the field thing or just a locker room thing or whatever, let's just put that aside. The primary reason that you're releasing Jaire Alexander is you're basically making the bet. You're shorting Jaire Alexander, right? You're saying, we don't think he's going to play enough games in order to pay off his $17+ million contract. So you're already making that bet. So this would just be doubling down on it, where you're basically saying, yeah, we don't think he's going to be able to play that many games. We don't think he's worth that much money. So if Minnesota or Detroit or Chicago or Philly want to go out and spend $17.5 million to bring Jaire Alexander in, or whatever it takes, and then he only plays 5, 6, 7 games for them, awesome, cool. They now have a resource on their hands that is a inefficient resource. So I wouldn't look at it that way at all. And also, if you're Green Bay, you also know that Jaire has deficiencies. You can run at him. You can run swing passes out past him. And he's not going to be the most physically attacking, run defender or tackling player in the world either. So you have now a potential weakness that you can exploit from time to time. So no, I wouldn't view it that way at all. If I thought that the best thing in the interest of my football team was releasing Jaire Alexander, getting that salary cap space back, and that he no longer fit within the organization, I'm doing that. Whatever happens after that happens, and we'll adjust accordingly from there on out. Big Papa Penguin, great name. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate you a ton. Also, Most Hated Minnesota caught one live. Glad you guys were able to get in today and join us. Always appreciate that. Dobbs is the only one that should be traded away. Of the receivers on the entire team, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily go that far. Dobbs would be fine to trade. Christian Watson would be fine to trade because he's probably not even playing a good chunk of this year. And, you're not sure if he's going to be back in 2026, and that contract negotiation could be difficult because of that. I'm fine trading Bo Melton. I'm fine trading Malik Heath. So to me, just, and even like Wicks, I love Wicks. You guys know that I love Dontavian Wicks. I wouldn't trade Wicks, but I'm also not going to let Dontavian Wicks get in the way if there's a player that I really love. Like, I'm not saying necessarily for Metcalf, but like if the Browns for whatever reason were like, listen, we want 2 firsts in Dontavian Wicks or like a first and a second in Dontavian Wicks for Myles Garrett. I'm sorry, I love Dontavian Wicks, but I'm sorry, I'm doing that deal. I'm going to go get, Myles Garrett in that situation. So it just depends on the situation, depends on the circumstances. To me, Jaden Reed is one that I really want to keep. I want to keep Wicks, but everything else is on the table. And even those guys, like if you're saying like who's untouchable on this roster, there's not a receiver on this roster that to me is untouchable for this team. It's going to be hard to pry away Jaden Reed. And I don't want to give up on Dontavian Wicks, but I don't think anyone's untouchable in that wide receiver core right now for the right deal. Once John Schneider comes off of whatever he is on, what's realistic for DK if they are truly getting off of him in Seattle, second and Dobbs? That's where I'm at. I think that is a fair deal for both sides. A second and Dobbs plus or minus some small stuff, right? If it's a second and Dobbs plus a sixth for Metcalf, or a second and Dobbs for Metcalf and a sixth, like give or take a little bit of leeway there, but that feels about right. You could probably also toy a little bit if like Seattle really wanted the first round pick. Like, could you do something that's like a first and Dobbs for Metcalf, a third, and I don't know who the right player would be in that situation, but maybe, some sort of smaller type player from Seattle in return. Trying to think of somebody that might make some level of sense here. And maybe there just isn't anyone that makes a ton of sense, but yeah, something to that effect. Probably, I guess there's maybe not a player here that does make a ton of sense. But if there were, maybe that could be something that you look at. But yeah, I mean, maybe you could look at a first and Dobbs for Metcalf in a third and a sixth or something like that. Maybe those would work. But to me, the one that just makes very clear and obvious sense would be a second and Dobbs for Metcalf. I think that would make a ton of sense, quite frankly, for both sides in that scenario. And you convinced me I'm all in on Josh Sweat. Hope the front office can make it happen. I will say this. I am not all in on Josh Sweat. Right? And that's fine if you are. I like the idea a lot. I think it is one that makes a ton of sense. I think they're going to have to overpay for him. And I'm always a little bit hesitant when you have to overpay for somebody. I'm a very big believer. Like when you're in free agency, go big game hunting. It is almost never really worth it. Like you almost want to live on the fringes, right? So either you're going big game hunting in one direction or you're looking for value free agents. Like that middle tier is where you usually get yourself in trouble. And you can make an argument that Josh Sweat is a little bit closer to that middle tier where you're going to give a big premier level free agent deal to somebody who's not a premier level player. He's a really good player, fits well in the system. Perfect, I think, tag team partner with Rashawn Gary at defensive end. He can play the run. He's an explosive pass rusher, variety of different moves. I really, really like him. All right. So I would be for it. I would be happy if that's the direction that they went in. But just know you're probably giving a premium contract to a not quite premium player. And there's always, again, a little bit of a disconnect there. So I'm for it. I'm cool with it. I think it is a good move for Green Bay overall. But I would say I'm not quite all in on Josh Sweat, but I would definitely be probably pro and happy if that's the direction that they ultimately went in. Harrison Porter and Noel Williams, good corner prospects. I have not watched either yet, but I'm very much excited to do so. And I will take your word for it, Packer fan 1418. What if we got Aaron Jones back for one more year? Now Jacobs and Jones in the backfield, love would be more of a no. So I can't get with you there. Grid on the gridiron, just a non-starter. You spent a third round pick on Marshawn Lloyd, who I think is going to be a very good running back. You've got Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks for cheap. And I don't think Aaron Jones is probably going to be super happy to come in and be that, backup running back to Josh Jacobs. And again, plus you're going to try to get Marshawn Lloyd on the field. Just a less than 0% chance. Unless Jones is out there come August and Josh Jacobs goes down with some sort of catastrophic injury and he's going to be done for the year and Jones is still out there and you can pick him up on a cheaper deal. Awesome. Bring him back in. Would make a ton of sense in that scenario. But outside of that, can't fathom any way in which Aaron Jones is going to be back. Also, I don't want Love to just be a game manager. I want him to be able to be attacking when he's at his best. He is a attacking, throwing quarterback, not over aggressive, but he is throwing down the field. He is finding open wide receivers. We saw it at the end of 2023, and the run game and the pass game should complement each other. Not just game manager, but they should complement each other. That's what I want to see from Jordan. So no, non-starter for me on Aaron Jones, although I love him to death. Hope he finds a great home this season, hopefully not in Minnesota. And I can continue to cheer him on, but not going to be in Green Bay. Dobbs in a third for DK is best. For us, maybe. I don't know if Seattle thinks that that's best, but I do think second or third, somewhere in that range, plus Dobbs for DK is probably in the right realm here. The Rams and Alaric Jackson have agreed to a 3-year, $57 million deal with $35 million guaranteed, keeping him in Los Angeles to protect Matthew Stafford. He was one of my under the radar potential free agent options for Green Bay. Never really realistic in any real legitimate way, but that's a big deal for him. And I didn't know if he was going to get quite in that 20 per year range. I thought maybe more in like that 13 mil range, but maybe even 15 mil, but that's a big deal for Alaric Jackson. Good for him. He's a good player. All right. Joel Embiid out the rest of the season as well. Sucks to be the Sixers. He's not going anywhere in the NFC North. He hates the teams, even though he's not a Packer. Who are we talking about that, Ricks? Sorry about that. He's not Za'Darius, who cashes out every one of Aaron Jones, who's a nice guy. I'm assuming we're talking about Aaron Jones there, but I don't know. Sorry, Ricks. I'm not completely following there. I'm okay with trading Dobbs if it is what Seattle wants to make it happen, but would much rather it be Wicks. See, I would much rather the opposite way. I would rather move on from Dobbs, especially because Wicks has 2 years left on his deal. So that to me is definitely a differentiator. I'd rather have Wicks for 2 more years than on his rookie deal than Dobbs for 1 more year in his rookie deal. Plus Dobbs has the double concussion. Plus Dobbs had the suspension last year. Much rather have Wicks back on the team than Dobbs in that scenario. I look forward to happy hour with every week. Throw Andy a bone and smash that like button. Appreciate that, Eric. What players would make sense for the most for the Packers to potentially trade this offseason? Eric, I believe that's going to be my topic for tomorrow's episode. So don't want to give it away here unless we get some big Packer news. I'll obviously talk about DK tomorrow as well. But my right now, my topic is what Packers could get traded this offseason. So not to poo-poo on your question here and, answer it for you, but tomorrow I believe I'm going to be going in great detail for that. So look out for that. A wary of alerts saying my cable price was raised. Be wary, I guess. Dennis, be careful for those out there. It's a wild world out there. What do you think it is the biggest misconception outsiders have about the Green Bay Packers? Great work you do. Thanks, Greg. That's a really good question. I think there's a couple. I think the one of like they're owned by all the fans. It's basically a corporate entity. Like you've got a board of directors that's deciding on everything. Any of the people who have their things of stock have no real say in the organization. Yes, it's in theory a really cute, kind, cuddly idea. It doesn't really work that way. For all intents and purposes, it is a corporate organization. It's a great story. I love it. It's cute. It's cuddly, but it's not really realistic with how things go. Now, they don't have an owner, which is important, and it's a huge piece of that. But you basically have a CEO that's working as a pseudo owner. He does have to report to the board. I think there's a lot of good things that come with that. But I think this idea that like Steve down the street from Lambeau is like the owner of the team and that he's like helping actively in like the day-to-day decisions or anything like that, I think that gets a little bit romanticized. So I think that is probably something that is a little bit on the misconception side of things. I also think that there is a little bit of a misconception of like, what Green Bay is as a city, and also like that, well, just players aren't going to go to Green Bay. Like they just got Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney. So I don't think that thought process exists quite as much anymore. I think Green Bay has established themselves as a very competitive, maybe not go-to team. And I'm sure there's certain free agents that are like, no, I'm good. I don't want to go to Green Bay from time to time, but I think it's much, much less than it was back in the day. I think if Green Bay wants to go after certain players, I don't think the city of Green Bay or the cold or anything like that is really holding it back to any real level. So I think those are maybe some, kind of common misconceptions. I'm fine with a little headstrong. Romeo Doubs is a little bit headstrong. So if you trade Doubs for Metcalf, you go from one headstrong to another, but you get a better player in the process. I'm not super concerned about that. Just tuning in, any truth to the rumors is much ado about nothing. Luke, your guess is as good as mine, but I'm going to pretend that it is much to do about something, and maybe Green Bay can get something done, but I'll believe a DK deal when I absolutely see it. And until then, we'll just pretend that it's happening and hope for the best. If you really like a free agent, is there really such a thing as an overpay? Let's say we thought Josh Sweat was going to get 18 mil per year. You have to pay 22 mil. You have urgency. Do you care? I absolutely care. I think there's a point to what you're making here, Will, and I don't think it's totally off base. Like, am I going, if my like set mark, right, is like 20 mil for Josh Sweat and whatever, it ends up being 21 million. Am I going to be like, nope, sorry guys. We really wanted to stick to 20. We're good here. We're done. You can go somewhere else. Now, hell no. I'm going to up the 1 million more per year, which is going to be $4 million total. That's water under the bridge. Like, not even going to be a splash in the bucket, right? But if I love Josh Sweat and I think 18 million is as high as I want to go, and he goes for 25, all right, that's a lot different. That's an extra $28 million over a 4-year period of time. And I think that does matter. I think the way that you have to always look at this is you have a finite amount of resources in the NFL, whether that's via free agency or the draft. You have only so many things that can help you acquire players, and you have to be smart with it. It's no different than budgeting in a day-to-day life of what you want to spend money on for entertainment and goods and services and vacations and savings and everything else, right? You have to budget it accordingly. And yeah, like you might be looking at TVs and you might fall in love with one that's 5,000 more than that you were hoping to spend. And you might just say, you know what? I love that TV. It would be awesome. It would be such an attention getter when people walk in, be the coolest TV ever, but it's outside of my budget. If I do it, I'm gonna have to do a lot of other things differently that I don't want to do. In this case for Green Bay, maybe it's going to affect their corner room. Maybe it's going to affect their wide receiver room. Maybe it's going to affect something else. And you have to take that under consideration. And maybe every once in a while you make that splurge and say, you know what? You only live once. I'm going to go and get that awesome TV. And then you do watch some other things for a while. And maybe it's going to be okay. Maybe instead of getting Subway or whatever, you're just making homemade sandwiches for the next 3 years. That's fine. You can find ways to do it, right? But you have to understand that there's going to be consequences to overspending on one thing rather than maybe staying within budget. But you also have to be very cognizant of what market trends are and what the going rate is. Like you might have gone into it thinking like, yeah, you know what? I want to spend, I really want Josh Sweat, but I think 18 million's the highest. And then all of a sudden, Dayo Odenigbo goes for like 23 million and the market completely shifts. And you're just like, okay, if Odenigbo is going for 23, thinking that Josh Sweat's going to get 18, like that's no longer the market that we're living in, right? Like we've got to readjust some things here. So you have to be cognizant of where the market's at, what is financially reasonable. You also have to make sure that just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. So you could see this run on pass rushers that just get ridiculous deals, and it might not be the right thing to do. Maybe at that point when everyone's zigging, you need to zag, and you're like, all right, well, the corner market's really suppressed because everyone's spending all their money on defensive end. So I'm going to go get Paulson Adebo and Byron Murphy and really, build up my corner room. Or I'm going to go and build up my offensive line since everyone else is spending all their money on defensive line. I'll build up my offensive line instead. Like, so sometimes you just have to weigh all of that out. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes that bigger, nicer TV might just be the impulse that you need. It might be the thing to get you through that year, and you just do it for the sake of doing it. Maybe you're having your midlife crisis, whatever it might be, and you go out and you do it and you spend it. And sometimes there's regrets. Sometimes there's not. Be like, that was the best decision I ever made. And other times you might be like, oh my God, like I'm going to have to spend like $5 on groceries this week because I decided to spend all that money on a TV. So it's not all that different than any other budget. There are times where you can go over it and you can be aggressive, and it's wise to do so. And other times you really want to be careful with what you do because, again, you have a finite amount of resources. And if you put too much of it into the wrong thing, now it's going to affect your team in a lot of other ways. And also the same thing too of like, you know what? You could get that TV home and your kid's playing Wii and he's going and the Wii controller comes off, and now you've got a Wii controller through your brand new TV, and you just spent that exorbitant amount of money on the one thing, and now that one thing is broken. And you could get Josh Sweat and an exorbitant amount of money, and he comes into camp the first day, ACL, Achilles, left arm falls off, loses sight in both of his eyes, and it's done, right? Like, you just never know. So you have to be careful with it. And I do think it's better to have a plan going in and more often stick to that plan, while also knowing that, again, sometimes you only live once and you got to go buy a Josh Sweat from time to time. All right. Where do we leave off here after my really lame analogies? All right, here we go. Andy, yes, I've gotten to biblical levels of coveting Josh Sweat. There you go. Go get him. Then in that case, go spend your extra, money that you need to go get your Josh Sweat. I totally get it. Thankful that you were able to believe in yourself and do this full time. We are all blessed for your work that you put into this. What are your expectations of Musgrave this season? 2 beasts this year. I'm assuming, Brandon, you mean obviously with Kraft and Musgrave. I hope so. Was very underwhelmed by Musgrave in both camp and on the field last year when he was healthy. Obviously coming back from the injury and then trying to reintegrate him into the offense did not work completely according to plan. He's never going to be a plus blocker. He can be a serviceable get in the way blocker, but I don't think that is, ultimately what's going to get him on the field. He's got to be a difference maker as a pass catcher, as a receiving threat. And he just really hasn't been able to provide that. He hasn't been able to get open consistently, hasn't been able to show a run after the catch ability like Tucker Kraft has. There has to be something more to his game, whether that's red zone, whether that's, those plays up the seam, whether it's, I don't really care at this point. There's got to be something that you can figure out that really makes him a difference maker in this offense. And if he can, awesome. Then you get this really cool, 2 tight end set. If not, he just becomes a smaller piece of the offense where you can use in certain situations and scenarios. I think this is a very important third season for Luke Musgrave coming up. Hopefully he can stay healthy. I think that would really kickstart it in the right way and hopefully getting him in the right direction. A ton of talent there in Luke Musgrave. Hopefully he can find it. As DK quit on his team midseason because he didn't like his role in that week's game plan, we talked about it a little bit. I don't know if we need to go that aggressively, but I get what you're saying, Fred. Something on the Raiders having interest in Jaire. Seen a couple other teams. We'll see. Hopefully, garner all that interest. The more interest in Jaire, the better. The more likely it is that Green Bay gets something good in return. Does the instant success of Stroud, Jane Daniels, Bo Nix make the idea of sitting a quarterback for 3 years seem silly? No, because I think it always depends on the quarterback, right? You could look at Caleb Williams last year and be like, hey, maybe he should have, had a little bit more time to develop. Maybe Michael Penix will be somebody that looks like, he probably should have had a little bit more time, or maybe he comes in and tears it up. I think it's very specific to the individual quarterback. I can tell you wholeheartedly, Jordan Love would have been a unmitigated nightmare as a rookie. If he would have got thrown into it, Aaron Rodgers would have been an unmitigated nightmare thrown into his role as a rookie. Both of them just were not ready. And to me, I think they both would have gotten into bad habits. And I think it would have really affected all of them. I have a hot take on this, by the way. Joe Flacco. I, to this day, believe that despite Joe Flacco being as successful as he was as a rookie, what was he out of Delaware or Delaware State? One of those, like, was it like Delaware State? I felt going into that draft that Flacco was going to need a little bit of time to really develop. He ended up being obviously a really good quarterback in the league for a long period of time. He was good as a rookie right away. I still to this day believe that if there would have been a team that would have given him a couple of years to really learn things and like get his mechanics down and everything, I think he would have potentially been even exponentially better in that situation. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he just would have been the same Joe Flacco, but you would have lost 2 years of playing time with him. It's within the realm of possibility, but I think certain quarterbacks need that time. I think others are just able to come in and play right away. And I don't think there's a perfect science or scenario to it in any real way, shape, or form. Anthony Richardson was not ready to come in and play. He just wasn't. He needed time to develop, and they got him in way too soon, and it did not go well. Bryce Young was not ready to come in and play. So Stroud, yes. Daniels, yes. Bo Nix, yes. Bryce Young, no. Caleb Williams, TBD. The Anthony Richardson, no. Just depends on the quarterback. Love and Rodgers would have been no. They would not have been ready right away. No chance. So you just have to take it on each individual quarterback. Fred didn't remember that, but thought I saw the Seahawks complaining about him blocking when he felt like it. I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure there's maybe a little bit of smoke there, but I didn't have any real issue with DK and the way he blocked on the outside. Our cornerback room isn't as bad as our safety room was last offseason, but adding high-end talent is a bigger priority than last year, in my opinion, because of positional value. It's a fair way of looking at it, Nathan. No notes on my end. So Brandon and most state of Minnesotan have the exact same name. Small world. If Jaw is gone, it will be far worse. In what capacity here? Sorry, I don't know what that context was. Any chance AJ Dillon returns to the team? JP, I don't think so. I mean, the only way that Green Bay has interest if he takes a 1-year vet minimum, right? If Dillon comes to Green Bay and says, I just want to stay in Green Bay. I've got family here. I've got, everything is here. I'll just give me a 1-year vet minimum and I'll come back. If you're Goody, you can't say no to it. Like, you just inherently have to say yes. You should be honest with AJ and say, hey, we'll do this, but like, you're probably going to need some injuries to make the team, because Jacobs isn't going anywhere. Marshawn Lloyd's not going anywhere. Those are 2 locks to make the team. And right now, with their age and their contract being younger and like smaller and everything like that, Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks will be ahead of AJ Dillon on the pecking order and on the depth chart as well. The first thing I would say is this: if I were AJ Dillon or if I were AJ Dillon's agent, I would say, dude, you need to go somewhere else. Like, this is not where you want to be right now in Green Bay. So you've got to find a different place to go play, because there's just not a spot for you. Not to mention, Green Bay still could, in a very deep running back draft, take somebody on day 3 of the draft, or maybe even find an undrafted free agent. And that's even more competition that you're going to have. So at best, and I mean at best, he goes into the offseason as number 5 running back, and he's going to at least need 1 injury. Even in that scenario, they need to keep 4 running backs on the roster, and he might need 2 injuries. Might need more than that if they find a good running back in the draft or undrafted free agency. So I don't think Green Bay has that interest. I don't think Dillon should want to come back to play to Green Bay based on where their depth chart is at running back right now. And I just think it makes sense for everyone involved that he probably ends up with another team. All right. Maybe they're 2 brothers. Yes, 2 brothers with the exact same name. That'd be amazing. No room for AJ. Nicholas, I agree. Watson and a 3rd for Metcalf. I just don't know why Seattle would have any interest. Like, there's nobody going to have any interest in Christian Watson, right? Nobody's giving any value to a wide receiver that's on a 1-year deal, and 70% of that season he's going to be out with a torn ACL, MCL, etc. And the 30 other percent, he's going to have to work his way back and ramp up to get back to any sort of real playing level. And it's not like you gain anything in like contract negotiations unless you're going to franchise tag him, which clearly is not going to be the case. So there's just no value for Christian Watson for any team trading for him. You're trading for taking on his contract and getting almost nothing for it in return. So you have a good player there, maybe long-term, but he's not in a long-term deal. He's just an unrestricted free agent next year. So I don't see any team actually doing that with Christian Watson. Doesn't really make any sense. So I don't think there's going to be any value there. Do the Packers list their board members publicly? I believe so. Yeah, because it's always something that's announced to. Yeah, you can just look up the board of directors. So yeah, there's a whole list of them. I don't know, it looks like maybe like 25, somewhere in that range, maybe 30. So yeah, there's a whole list. Packers.com/team/executive committee, executive-committee. So yeah, it's out there. Andy, what do you think of Demetrius Knight? He had a solid workout at the combine. Have not watched him yet. Sorry about that. We'll get there eventually. I promise. Watson can't be traded. He's hurt. He can be traded. The team just has to waive the physical. So you can still trade or injured players. This isn't Madden where it won't let you do it. You can still trade them, but yeah, the team just acquiring them has to waive the physical in that situation. Johnny, how dare you? We started 29 minutes before you got here. It's unacceptable, my man. Without doxing anyone, obviously, where do most of the players live in Green Bay? Do most live pretty close to Lambeau? JP, I get asked this question from time to time, and I have no effing clue. People will get mad at me too. Like, you cover the Packers, you don't even. I could not tell you where a single Green Bay Packer lives. Not a one. Nor do I care to know, nor do I have any inkling of information on it. So no idea. Absolutely no idea. There's maybe someone's a better person to ask than me, but I don't know where a single Packer player lives. Not good news when your name starts getting tossed around in trade talks. Depends on the situation, but usually probably not, no. I love when reporters who are not Green Bay fans say Green Bay does not spend money on free agents. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Gouda spent every year since being GM. They do spend money. He spent money every time they've had the opportunity to spend money. So first year, Jimmy Graham, what was it? Quentin Dial, Mercedes Lewis, like they went out and spent pretty aggressively, specifically on Jimmy Graham, that first free agency wave. Then the second one was the Darius Preston, Amos, and Billy Turner. And then didn't have money for a while, more value free agent signings, your Christian Kirksey's, your Rick Wagner's, things like that. So a lot of value free agent signings for a while. Then as soon as he got money again, it was Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney. And then now this year he has money again. So every time he's had money to spend, he has gone out and spent it aggressively. I would not expect anything different this offseason. All right. Let's see. The Green Bay area is very spread out. There are several nicer areas around Green Bay. I've known players in several different areas. Yeah, that makes sense. When it comes to the combine, what characteristics do the Packers look for in corners, DLs, and offensive linemen? Probably don't have time to get into that today, Eric, but check out the Green Bay draft guide where they do just an unbelievable job of going over all the intricate details of that stuff, and they'll get you all covered for all the measurables and things like that. I got to get out of here in about 3 minutes, guys, just as a heads up. So just going to try to go through this lightning round. Draft is loaded with D linemen and edge, smart free agent pickup, plus great draft in the pack is back. Love the thought process, Steve. Let's see. Hopefully Andy gets this one because I don't want to type all that. Oh yeah. So again, check out the Green Bay draft guide for that. The Packers met with a couple of the corners at the combine, but they also met with tight end Colston Lovely. Don't put any stock in who they meet. They meet with everyone at some point or another. It's the most worthless piece of information. This is not anything on you, Luke, but I actually loved, by the way, Howard, I can't think of his name. Why am I drawing a blank? Travis Hunter, sorry. The Travis Hunter, anytime he got asked of what team he met with, he just said, next question. Like, it's the most brilliant thing ever. It doesn't matter one iota what teams met with what players. The only thing that matters when you're tracking if a team met with a player is the top 30 visits. That's usually a little bit more worthwhile in keeping track of, especially from a Packers standpoint. Everything else, they'll meet with every player at some point in time, whether it's on campus, whether it is on a top 30 visit, whether it's when they go to the pro day, and they just do it at different times. So a team meeting with a player literally means absolutely nothing. What do you do when the only woman you've ever loved is with another man and does not have romantic feelings for you? Jacob Westendorf, I don't know how to answer that, my friend. That's a great question. That's probably something that's way above my pay level. Thank you for the question, though, Jacob Westendorf. Oh, you're amazing. I will be interested in the answer to that one, Jacob. Jacob bringing the heaters. Yes, he is. He always does. Knowing this year's shallow free agent pool, would it be best to just budget spend this in this year and wait for next year's class? I don't think you can quite go about it that way, but I think you have to kind of look at it in an individual way with every single decision that you have of just does the free agent signing make sense or not? If it's somebody that makes sense for your team at the right level, go out and do it. If you feel like the price is too high and it's not going to be a good ROI, then don't do it just for the sake of doing it. But I think they're going to need to add something. I don't think they can just sit on their hands and be like, we're going to sit this free agency out. but I also think that you need to be as smart about it as possible. So it's going to be very interesting to kind of take a look at it. It must be a true Packers fan's name, Andy. I totally agree. In your recent Q&A, you mentioned adding a strong safety linebacker hybrid type. Would Oladapo be that guy for us already in-house? He could be. Although I really liked how he played at safety in a small sample size last year, but could be something that he does eventually. But I do kind of like him in the way that he played at safety last year. Third round pick and Wicks for DK. It gets done. Maybe that would get done. I think Seattle probably wants a little bit more in that scenario. What are your thoughts on the pageantry of the combine? I think we've probably reached a point where it's maybe a little bit too much, but I love the fact that we get to see these players all in a very similar situation. So I think when you get to see these players all do the same drills side by side, run all the same, different sort of tests and things like that, it really gives you an idea for who's better than another and things like that, or at least comparatively, just how they move in real time, how they move compared to the other ones. Like, I think there's value in it. Again, I think it probably gets a little bit too much pageantry at this point in time, but I don't know. I still love it. I think it has a lot of value, and I'm not certainly against it in any way. All right, friends, I think that does it for all the questions. Thank you so much. Jacob, I'll do a little bit of research on your question and get back to you as soon as I have an answer for you. But I appreciate you guys a ton. I will be back here next week, of course, with all new Q&As, and then I'll be back tomorrow with an all new episode as well. It's going to do it for me for now, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.